And my name's Alan Brown, I'm the coordinator of the Health and Education Program. On behalf of Koori College, on behalf of the health worker students here, I'd like to welcome everybody to the book launching, and now I'd like to hand over to your host for the rest of the proceedings, Gary Foley.
The reason we're here this morning, folks, is to have the Melbourne launching of this, a book called Health Business, which is a report that was commissioned for the Central Australian Aboriginal Congress. This book is the most important book yet written on Aboriginal health in Australia, primarily because it shows very clearly two things. Firstly, it shows what Aboriginal people themselves in Central Australia, how they regard the healthcare delivery systems that are available to them in Central Australia. But more importantly, in doing that and getting the Aboriginal people's opinions and attitudes on the types of services available in departments. In the last 10 years, it's been estimated that somewhere around $250 million of Aboriginal health money has been wasted because it's been put in to white-controlled, inappropriate state health department programs around Australia. This book, as clearly as any other report that's ever been produced, shows that Aboriginal people want to control their own healthcare delivery. On top of all of that, the simple fact remains that in the year 1980 financial year, for $16 million, the combined resources of all state health departments around Australia were able only to provide a limited preventive healthcare only service to less than 5% of the Aboriginal population of Australia. In the same year, for $2.9 million, Aboriginal community-controlled health services around Australia were able to deliver an integrated primary and preventive healthcare service to somewhere between 50 and 60% of all Aboriginal people in Australia. So in terms of cost effectiveness alone, Aboriginal people have proven that they can solve their own problems if they're given the resources to do so. They've proven that they can do it more efficiently and better than any state health bureaucracy, and the message is quite clear in this book. Aboriginal people demand that the Commonwealth Government take away the $16 million a year it is currently giving to state health departments and put that money in the hands of the people who have proven that they can do the job a lot better, i.e. Aboriginal people. Until such time as the Commonwealth Government is prepared to do that, the money that they're spending in the state health department programs around Australia will continue to be wasted, but more importantly, the Aboriginal people themselves are the ones who are going to continue to suffer. In the last few weeks we've seen some of the reports that have come out of Queensland as to the state of health of Aboriginal people there. All of those reports showing how bad the situation is in Queensland clearly support our contention that the State Health Department in Queensland is incapable of even understanding what the problems are, let alone doing anything about it. And exactly the same story exists in the Northern Territory, exactly the same story exists in Western Australia and New South Wales. It's only in Queensland and it's only in Victoria and New South Wales. It's only in Victoria and New South Wales and South Australia where we're starting to make any sort of headway. There's still a long way to go, but Clyde Holding and the new Labor government should realise, more than anyone else, they've claimed that they understand these facts, and yet they too are reluctant at this stage to do anything constructive about changing the system. Until such time as the Commonwealth is prepared to change that system, Aboriginal health is going to remain as bad as it is around Australia. And it's unfortunate that the debate that's taken place in the last couple of months on Aboriginal health has failed to really get down to that nitty-gritty. Because as we've said for 7 years, as all independent reports have said for the last 7 years. In particular, in 1980, the Prime Minister himself, Malcolm Fraser, commissioned his own personal report, prepared by senior public servants in Canberra, with unprecedented access to government files. Malcolm Fraser thought that his report would counter the Trachoma report. As it turned out, the PER report, which Malcolm Fraser commissioned, came down to the same conclusions as us. It called on the federal government to change their funding policy. But did Malcolm Fraser do it? No, he suppressed the report. Is Clyde Holding going to do it? It remains to be seen. I'd now like to call on the two authors of this book to step up so that you may see who they are. Pam Nathan is very reluctant to talk because, having worked with Aboriginal people in Central Australia, she knows her place. Pam realises more than as much as anyone who's ever worked with Aboriginal people that the more important thing is for Aboriginal people themselves to say what they have to say. Dick, however, is very reluctant to talk also, but we'll get them up. And we also have the Deputy Director of the Central Australian Aboriginal Congress, which commissioned this report, Mr. Colin McCormack. I'd now like to call on him to say a few words, as well as having Dick and Pam up the front. What we're going to do after Colin talks, I'm going to just very briefly, in about 10 seconds, formally announce the Melbourne launching of this book. And then, if the media people want to talk to the authors of the book, Dick and Pam, they can do so. While we're doing that, we're going to show the videotape film that was made by the Central Australian Aboriginal Congress of the launching, the Alice Springs launching of this book, which coincided with the visit to Alice Springs by our dearly beloved Prince Charles and Princess Diana and little brat. But the point was made, I might add, at the launching of this book in Alice Springs. It was very appropriate in the sense that Prince Charles and Diana were there, because it really highlighted the difference between the two cultures that exist in the Northern Territory. Whereas on one hand, the white people in the Northern Territory were most upset that Prince Charles and Diana had to stay in what they considered a second-rate hotel, the Gap Motel in Alice Springs. And yet, at the same time as Charlie and Diana are staying in a supposedly second-rate hotel room in Alice Springs, there are literally hundreds of Aboriginal people who were severely affected by the floods which forced Charlie and Diana into the Gap Motel, and who were lucky to even have a little bit of canvas over their heads, let alone have a second-rate spa and a second-rate double bed and all modern conveniences like Charlie and Diana had. So in a sense it sort of highlighted the difference, the drastic difference between housing conditions for the two peoples who live in Central Australia. Anyway, I'd now like to call on Colin McCormack from the Deputy Director of the Central Australian Aboriginal Congress to say a few words.
I'd just like to thank people for coming along to this launching. I'd like to thank Victorian Aboriginal Health Service and NADA for their participation in launching this, setting up this launching. And we've had just come back from Canberra having a meeting with the Minister regarding the recommendations that were set out in the book. We had that all these recommendations that are put down be implemented as soon as possible. The book, which Gary just spoke about, highlights all the health problems around Central Australia, and we hope that these things will all be sorted out once we get out total control of all those health things. That's been all.
Thanks, Colin. I just reiterate before officially launching this book in Melbourne that the message in this book is very clear to politicians, both federally and stately. The debate on Aboriginal health must come back to the fundamental principles involved, and they very simply are give the resources available to Aboriginal people in their own communities, and they can do a better job of solving their own health problems than any other agency that exists. It's very clear. All of this editorial agonising that's gone on in the last few weeks in the newspapers of Australia, most of it seems to have missed the point. The point is very simple, it's very clear. It's got nothing to do with more research, it's got nothing to do with more money being made available. There is more than enough resources available at the moment. The simple problem is that the resources available, 80% of them, are going into programs which have been proven time and time again to not work. For the government, the message is clear. They shall be judged on whether they are prepared to put those resources in the hands of Aboriginal people or not. If they do, they're fair dinkum. If they don't, they're not. Simple as that. I'd like to now formally declare this book, Health Business, has been launched in Melbourne. Anybody who wants to know what's really going on in Aboriginal health and what's really wrong, I strongly recommend that you buy a copy of this book. Until such time as more Aboriginal researchers and more Aboriginal people get out into the field and write their own experiences and the stories of their own people, this book will remain the most important book yet written in this country on Aboriginal health. Thanks very much.